Morning, everybody. We we come from a slightly. I noticed that we come from a slightly different context, in the sense that uh, what we've been trying to do is not really track data and stuff like that. Uh, we've been trying to look at the teaching learning process. That's the core of our work, and see how we can improve it. And just to give you a quick background, I'm sure many of you are aware that in the last, say, couple of decades, technology has come into a big way into classrooms. And we're not just talking about private schools, but even in government schools. And one of the major ways in which technology is used is to give a computer in the hands of a teacher. And we have noticed that though in the last couple of decades, in terms of infrastructure, there's been a progressive enhancement in terms of availability of computers or content. Still, the impact has not been felt on the process of learning. Students are not learning better because of these technologies. And when we really look at why this is happening, broadly we could see a couple of reasons. One, of course, is that the perception of teacher in terms of how this technology adds value to the learning. A teacher has to really perceive that this is something that will help her children learn better. That's one part of it. The other part of it is also in terms of the skills needed by the teacher to use this technology. And there we've had a significant challenge, because compared to all other professionals, and if we take professionals, I mean, say, doctors, lawyers, and anybody else, somewhere the teaching community has been very averse to technology. They don't, they're either afraid of it, or they think that if I open the computer and something will go wrong, and then it'll get spoiled, and so on and so forth. So this project, we've called it Bridge IT. We also call it Nokia Education Delivery, and our partner Pranshu, who represents Microsoft now, is also here with us. The objective was broadly to look at, given this scenario of computers and teachers struggling with each other, can we try a mobile instead of a computer? Given also that, like we've been discussing since yesterday, just about everybody has a mobile phone. Some people have more than one mobile phones, and lots of people are much more comfortable using a mobile phone. So this project was initiated to see how this can play a role inside a classroom to enhance the teaching learning process. The model typically is that we have been following here in India, and the project works in several countries. Pranshu will talk to you about it briefly. The model here is a one-to-many model. As you can see in that picture, each teacher gets a mobile phone with what is called as Nokia Education Delivery, which is a software where she can access content from our server. So she connects the mobile phone to a display device, and she uses that to engage the students better in the process. That's the whole project. Some of the people involved in this, Nokia has played a significant role in terms of inputting on the program design, and of course Nokia Education NED, the platform itself, is from Nokia, apart from the funding. The Pearson Foundation was also a partner. They gave us a lot of content apart from partly funding the program. And our organization, which is Easy Vidya, has been involved in the strategy and implementation of the program, apart from the government partners who've been involved in involving schools and teachers. If you look at the reach, we started in a small way with about 30 schools. Currently, we work with about 300 teachers in 3 different states, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Haryana. And there are 5 different government boards that participate in this, teachers of 5 different boards. I thought I'll first speak about some of the challenges that we've been encountering in this. One was, of course, challenges with regard to content. It was in terms of both enriching the content and in terms of trying to localize the content, because a lot of content came from the Pearson Foundation, and the dialect was a problem. People couldn't understand what was being said and so on. So we had to localize it. Some of it we had to dub, some of it we had to provide subtitles and so on. The other was a lot to do with how the teacher views it. The first reaction whenever a program goes into any school is, the first reaction from the teacher is, humko ye kaam bhi karna padega. It's one more thing that I need to do among the 10 different things that I'm doing. And our whole struggle has been to, help teachers understand that this is not one extra task. Whatever we are trying to teach, we just want to do it better, engage students better so that the process of learning becomes more meaningful and students understand what they're learning. One of the highlights of this was we prepared a simple one-page note on each of the content objects that we call activity guides, which comes from one of the challenges that teachers were facing is, I don't know where to use this. Right? You've given me so many content objects, but I don't know where to use it. Which lesson do I use it? Do I use it before the lesson? Do I use it after the lesson? Do I use it somewhere in between? So each of these pages gave simple guidelines for the teacher in terms of this is the content, this is the lesson that it maps to, and this is how you can use it. And some tips in terms of how do I engage the student. So for example, something as simple as flash the video, pause it halfway through, ask a few questions, then continue, and so on. So this was something that really enhanced the usage of the technology in the classroom, and teachers started finding it a lot easier after this. Just to quickly run you by some of the results that we've, and it's still ongoing. We did a student assessment. The program itself was focusing on English and science. So a large amount of educational programs go by outcomes in terms of how students fare in tests. And so we also had a test. We had a control and a experiment group, and we could see that in both the subjects, science was much more than English. In both the subjects, we could see a higher performance of students in the NED group, which is the group where this technology was applied, as opposed to the control group where the regular teaching was going on with no technology, or some of the classes had computers. But as an organization, we've also been keen that we not stop with just student assessments, because yesterday we were discussing in our group that the whole notion of measuring quality in education is such a complex idea that it's very simplistic to just put the students through some tests and then conclude for ourselves that, yeah, they're doing well and so things are going well. So one of the things we did was also to try and look at the classroom processes. So for example, if we go into the classroom, who's doing most amount of talking? Are students even allowed to speak in the classroom, or is it a complete monologue between the teacher? That's an indicator for us in terms of the quality of processes within the classroom, and we believe that this is equally important when compared to the outcomes. So it's not just the outcomes. So some of the things that we try to monitor, we try to have indicators for aspects like lesson quality. What is the style of teaching? For example, is the teacher able to go to the students in her class, or is she even simply her physical position in the class? Is she just standing in the same place and talking, or is she going closer to the students? Is she able to give each one some attention that each child might deserve? How engaged are the students? Are they asking questions? Are they talking? What are the kind of questions that they're asking in class? These are all some, and of course the use of technology itself. These are also things that we measured as we went by, apart from just assessing the students. And we found that some of these indicators were actually far higher than the actual student outcomes. The student outcomes, as you may have seen, was about 7% and 15%. But some of the qualitative indicators, we saw a huge change in terms of how students are being engaged in the class, or what is even the teacher's acceptance for such a program. So if you see, student engagement was higher. This is again another, the same thing in the two groups, where we looked at what we call as direct instruction, where the teaching is very didactic. The teacher is talking, the students are listening, as opposed to a more participative learning scenario in a class. The direct instruction in the NED group showed a significant reduction over the last year or so. So that's pretty much it. These were some of the program itself has received a lot of recognition from various quarters. In fact, we've been a part of this consultation last year as well, and I'm very thankful to DEF and UNICEF for that. This is the Corporation Commissioner of Chennai, who's been very enthusiastic about the program, because he personally makes rounds to these schools, and he's able to see that several of the teachers have really started getting into the thick of things. And to us, that was a very, very good indicator, because to us, even in our training programs, one of the things that we've been emphasizing with the teachers is the technology itself is a tool. ये टेक्नोलॉजी को लेके क्लास में जाना प्रोग्राम का मकसद नहीं है. The program's objective is to make sure that your students enjoy learning, they find meaning in coming to the classroom. It's not a disconnected and boring process for them. And that several teachers are able to, see, they're able to come back and tell us that it's not just my students, I'm enjoying what I'm doing a lot more than what I did a couple of years back. And one of the reasons we believe also is closely related to the technology is that in a classroom with a computer, when compared to a classroom with a computer and this, the device is a lot more personalized here. The computer sits in the classroom, the teacher comes and goes. Here the teacher accesses the device on the go. She's able to carry it home. She's able to access the content wherever she is. And that somewhere teachers have started telling us both directly and indirectly that it is giving a huge sense of empowerment for this teacher who's otherwise struggling with existing technologies in the classroom. And I think that's been one of the greatest successes of the programs. So I think I'll just stop here. Perhaps before we take questions, I'd like to quickly invite Pranshu as well to talk a little bit about this program, because this is a global program going on in at least 7 countries, if I'm right. So I'll just quickly invite, with the permission of y'all, invite Pranshu to also share about what's happening in the rest of the world with the same program. The program is the same, the models are slightly different. Pranshu.
Hi everyone. So just to add a couple of more details. So this program started almost 7 years back in Philippines, and it has been since then it has traveled to Africa, to Latin America, and it's a free software module, so anyone can start practicing. The only difference is that when we say we are highly involved is when we are funding the program. But otherwise, this is a program, if I look at how many people have downloaded the software and have used it, is over 300 organizations across the world who are using it in some way or the other. We are not directly involved, and we do not get to know how they have used this. So that's a difference. I think one biggest byproduct of this program was the actual sense of pride that we see in the teachers. The fact that now they can look at the content very differently. They can play around with the content, and they can even generate content on their own. So for example, if I'm going to teach about species as a part of any chapter, then the fact that we could, I as a teacher can shoot photographs on my own, make it a part of the curriculum, that's a huge, huge enabling thing for the teacher. And that has kind of changed a lot of dynamics in the classroom. Also, in many cases, what we have seen is the teacher understands the content which she thought she understands otherwise, but only after going through the videos. For example, let's take example of a digestive system. How does food get assimilated once it enters your esophagus? So, something teacher hasn't visualized earlier. But now after seeing the videos on a phone, she gets a very thorough understanding. This is what I was teaching for, several years. And these are facts which were told to us by teachers, not just in India, but across the world, that the fact that now there is a third dimension, the visual dimension in teaching, has completely changed the classroom. We recently experimented this with a few underprivileged schools at Nokia Funds in Gurgaon. And the results were even more astonishing. The fact that the dropout rates absolutely became zero. It was just so much fun in the classroom. This is a classroom where you get to see animations which have a story, which the student should learn. But the fact that it is coming in a very interesting way brought out, almost killed the dropout rates. We got students who had left coming back to the schools. And so I think very interesting things are possible. And it's a free platform. Along with all sorts of technology support if you are willing to use it. I'll also, in the afternoon session, which I will be talking in, I'll share also some other technologies which are available from Nokia's side. Nokia data gathering tool is one of those tools which is available for anyone to use. I saw a lot of duplicacy of Nokia data gathering tool which is being done by many organizations. So there are all these duplicate efforts, but they can all be avoided because this is a free technology available for anyone everywhere, and we even provide the hosting costs for the server. So I'll share those things later. Thank you.
Very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
I was wondering that is there a particular group size in the classroom that's where this kind of an interaction is at an optimum level? Because the size of the screen, so how does the teacher actually engage if there are say 25 to 30 people or children around? That's one. And second is, since you have been also monitoring it very closely, is there a particular age group also? Although there may not be, is there a particular age group where this kind of a mediation, where the teacher is using this as a tool, is better? And last part, is there a teacher training that you had to train the teachers to effectively use the tool? How long? And how do you put the content in their devices? Is it, so that's.
Okay, that's a whole lot of questions. The first one is in terms of how do we engage the student. See, one of the things is the teacher actually, just like we're using the computer here to hook it with the display device, instead of the computer, the teacher plugs in a phone. That's the only difference. However, if you're talking about the size of a classroom as a constraint, then yes. I was in a conference recently where we were talking about assessment. We've been working very closely with CBSE on continuous assessments. And there was an American lady there who was talking about their classrooms. And, after a plenary discussion, she got up and said, all this sounds good, but it's a huge challenge for us. We have 12, sometimes 15 students in a classroom. Right? And this is pretty much the same reaction that the whole hall had. Everybody was laughing and we said, we have 50, 70, 100, more than 100 kids in our classroom, and she couldn't believe it. But I think the way we see it is, we look at it in two terms. One is in terms of what is the teacher's attitude and how do we slowly make those incremental changes in the teacher's attitude, and that's a longer process. The other is in terms of the teacher's abilities itself, just skills to handle such a large classroom. So can we equip her with tools to manage a classroom, break it down into smaller groups, allow parallel learning to happen, right? Because a classroom is typically always viewed as all the 40 people doing the same thing at the same point of time for 40 minutes. And that need not necessarily be so. So I don't know, that's the risk. In terms of how the content is loaded, all the content sits on a server. The teachers can download the content onto their devices. They have a catalog, so the content is sort of cataloged according to their boards. So the teacher in Haryana, teacher in Tamil Nadu, teacher in Andhra Pradesh will be viewing different catalogs because their syllabi are slightly different. So according to their syllabus, the content is tweaked in terms of what can be used in term 1, term 2, and so on. So the teacher goes through this catalog, she pulls the content onto her phone. That's how she accesses it. And in terms of training,
so can she pull it onto a computer and then take it on a USB?
She can.
So it's just that we know connectivity, we know broadband, we know the challenges that we are facing.
She can.
Just that all of this can be made.
She can. I'll just spend a minute on the training. Most of our training, so we spend 2-3 days before the start of the program, and then we also keep going to the schools, once a term. Apart from that, because the whole program hinges on a mobile phone, we just keep calling these teachers periodically to, say hello to them, find out how things are. Our emphasis on the program has continuously been in terms of talking about the larger picture, in terms of what are we trying to do. So this is not this is not an intervention. ऐसा नहीं है कि ये mobile classroom में डाल दिया तो सब कुछ बदल जाएगा. That's not how it works. What we are trying to change is how we look at learning itself, because we all come from a paradigm of learning where learning means I know 10 things and I have to transfer it to you, and that's still how most teachers look at learning, in terms of knowledge transference, but not in terms of co-creation and discovery of continuous discovery and learning. So our training has always focused on that, and incidentally we say, you know what, by the way, here's a tool that will help you. You know, here's a phone, here's whole lot of videos. Yes, no doubt the videos are going to engage you better, but if you're going to use the videos and this tool, but if you're going to come from the same paradigm that I will teach and you will listen, then the whole program doesn't make sense. So our effort has been more on in terms of focusing on the larger idea of training itself, in terms of teacher capacity building.
One more question. You just told that there is a monitoring of the lesson quality, teacher's style of teaching, and how children are engaged. So who monitors it and how you monitor it? What's the style of teacher teaching, process of teaching? It is not the teacher monitoring.
So basically what we did was, for each of these things we defined certain criteria, certain parameters, which can be as objective as possible, which can be viewed by anyone from the outside. So the idea was to try and parameterize quality of teaching. I know that's a problematic area, but that's the best way we see it happening as of now. So if you look at, for example, student engagement, then simple things like who's talking. So even we give a simple band in terms of, we call it teacher talk time, and we say on a scale of 100%, right? In the half an hour that you were in the classroom, tell me what % of time was a teacher talking, right? And at the start, usually at the start of the program, we find that 90% of the time it's the teacher who's talking in the class. Do we see a reduction in this? So this is one example of a parameter. So we have similar parameters defined for each of these things. The monitoring itself was done at multiple levels. One was our own people who used to go into the classrooms. Of course, we can't afford to go there as much as we'd like to, owing to also other reasons, because the program itself has to be sustainable on itself. So the similar tools that we were using to monitor, over a period of time, we started also giving it to supervisors in the schools, headmasters, senior teachers, and now we even share these tools with the teacher itself. So we're trying to tell the teachers, look, these are the things we want to see changing in your classroom, right? And we make those parameters quite open to them. And Pranshu was mentioning Nokia data gathering. In the last year of the program, we've also tried to gather data from teachers through this tool, so that we don't have to go there. So we ask them a simple set of half a dozen questions, and they tell us those answers. And we sort of put all these together and see what the data looks like.
Yes.
Calculation of how much time they have taken for teaching, how much time they are interacting, how much time the student is raising questions. If those parameters have been set by the principle of education, I think that we can standardize a system of evaluating the quality of education.
Totally agree, sir. We did actually, this was a collaborative exercise, and at the cost of sounding vain, I'd also say that perhaps after having worked for a couple of decades in education, we consider ourselves a little bit of experts in trying to crack these problems. Yes.
Yes, you spoke about the data being downloaded from the web server. So is there a package which is installed on a particular device? And is this package like, if it's yes, is this package available for all the platforms? That's like my first question. The second is, when you talk about audiovisual content coming onto a mobile device, what kind of a bandwidth limitations do you face?
Yeah, so the bandwidth has been an issue, especially in some of the remote schools. One of the partners is Andhra Pradesh Residential Education Society, and they run residential schools in fairly remote locations of Andhra Pradesh. one of the ways in which we've been trying to work around this is, and we didn't do this much, the teachers did it themselves, because they're able to carry these home and they live in places where connectivity is relatively better off. They sort of plan their work in such a way that I do my downloading back home. And so I'm prepared for the next day's class or the next week's class. In terms of the software itself, it is an open source platform, like Pranshu was mentioning. All the devices that we used here were Nokia devices because the program was supported by Nokia. But as we go by, we're also hoping that we evolve this into a program which will adapt other, environments as well.
Interesting that to improve the quality of teaching or education, the technology is being used. I was just thinking in our health sector, we have different type of trainings, some basic foundation training, some in-service training, some professional courses for medical education and paramedical. Can it be replicated over there?
You mean training in medical education?
Yeah, at least for ANM or staff nurses or midwives. Because, in last say 10 or 15 years, we are observing the training quality is going down, and more involvement of trainers as well as training. That is also. So at the field level, we are not getting that much good workers.
I will share my thoughts, but I'll probably also bounce this to a medical professional who's sitting here, Dr. Aparna Hegde. He wants to know if this can be such use of technology in improving the quality of learning can be used in medical education. I believe it can, very well actually.
Yeah. We actually use similar technology actually to teach. When we do home-based care training, you need to do refresher courses. So it's a very good way of doing it. So, of course, every kind of medical training. Yes. So for example, our ANMs or all our nurses, even our urban centers, hospitals, the nurses have been trained for last, CME going on. This is a fantastic way of doing it. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. We can in fact help you develop content.
Okay, great.
That is one thing, the medical content.
So the main concern is the quality of the training and the involvement of the trainers as well as the training, so that we get good results at the ground level. We are not having really good frontline workers at the field level.
Yes.
We are facing different challenges, high MMR, high IMR, high TFR. But how to get it down, only the doctors or at the most staff nurses, they are being targeted administratively, not as a tool. These frontline workers are being used.
No, it helps them. We've done it.
Okay, so basically we're talking about standardizing
Yeah.
Content.
training and
Yes.
then having it available to various.
Yes.
This is one.
Yes.
You can download the content. I'm glad.
I think in classrooms, just 30 seconds. In classrooms, I think as far as teachers are concerned, one other huge challenge that they're facing today, which was probably not there, say 2-3 decades back when we all went to school, was that the whole idea of knowledge and information has suddenly exploded, right? And it's become so much more easily available that a lot of things that we used to talk about in classrooms are becoming meaningless for students now. Typically if you take a class 2, class 3, we talk about transportation as a topic, where students still are made to learn certain definitions like means of transport, modes of transport, and so on. But there's no reference to what's happening outside on the road, what kind of cars and bikes do you see, what do you drive, do your folks wear a seat belt? These are all questions that make learning a lot more relevant to the child, and the engagement increases.
screen we have given. So that is being connected through PC, and then the demo is being given. Some of the sometimes if we have the connectivity, we have the teleconferencing with the medical board, and we get the advice. Or even if we want the connectivity through the Gram Panchayat to the educational, we have virtual classroom sessions also on a different days. So those days we have a free classroom sessions. We will have interact with the student, and the teaching is done through virtual classes. So we have a good infrastructure, and some of the corporates they want to put some demo sessions and demo. In fact, last time some other company came and they said we will provide DC demo DCs to all the children so that they can practice at the Gram Panchayat level. If that comes into CSR by the India or some other company to promote the mobile usage.
From rural area perspective, what kind of screening devices could be used to project films or whatever?
Yeah. So we've had a mix of devices here. Some of the schools have projectors. A good number of schools have televisions across. In fact, Andhra Pradesh, just about almost every school has televisions, especially of the APR, the Andhra Pradesh Residential Education Society. We've also tried in a smaller number of schools Pico projectors. They also seem to be working. So just about any display device works. All we need is a connector to connect these together.
Pico is good. It's kind of adaptable to connect. But then analog TVs could be connected with the.
Yes, we have been. So the devices that we've been using are they have a TV out on them. So, and in fact, in majority of the schools, we don't have projectors, but we actually have televisions, and fairly old televisions, like at least a decade old televisions, but they're working on these.